15-year-old me would be pissed if I didn't ask you about this. What's John Jones like in person?
He's scary, dude. He's a big fucking guy.
Welcome back to the Prince Huda podcast. Prince Huda here. Very, very excited today to be joined by a special guest. If you're a fan of combat sports, you probably know the man I'm speaking to today. Misfits boxer, Misfits commentator, UFC Fight Pass commentator, karate combat fighter. I mean, this man's done it all. I can go on all day with the introductions, but I might as well give it to the guest himself, Ben the Bane Davis, joining me today. Ben, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, brother. It's great to be here with you.
I love it. I love it. I noticed the Misfits hoodie on too. I know they just
Come on.
announced a big card that I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. And transparently speaking, I'm grateful I can talk to someone today with the camera on and not have to talk about football. It's been a crazy week.
Hey, if we talked about football, I wouldn't have much for you. I'm not a big NFL guy, so I'm quite ignorant on that America's favorite pastime.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a Canadian, I've kind of just locked into America's favorite pastime as my content, and just Super Bowl week has just been absolutely nuts with all the videos and Chiefs and Eagles. And a funny thing with a lot of brands that I work with, you can't say the word Super Bowl, so you have to say big game. So it's just been a crazy, crazy few days. It's been weird.
So hold on. Why can't you say Super Bowl? Why is that a banned term?
So I think the way someone explained it to me is the NFL owns the term Super Bowl. So I think unless you're a licensed partner, you can't say Super Bowl. You have to say big game. So if you notice a lot of sports books, brands like the Uber Eats commercials of the world, they'll say big game or championship or finals.
Yeah,
They can't say the word Super Bowl. So that's been kind of fun to navigate as well.
that'd be funny. Just call it like the super match. This is the super game that's going down.
Yeah, super game or the large bowl, whatever they want to call it. There's
Large
just so many
ball.
different
Yeah,
things. But
that's
yeah,
pretty
I
good.
mean, I was kind of drawn to you just because I feel like you're everywhere these days. I've seen, every few months you're either commentating an event or fighting in an event. So I really just wanted to dive into your story a little bit, how you got into the broadcast game, how you got into the fight game, and just learn a little bit more of the man behind the Bane, if that makes sense.
Course, man. Yeah, I guess if I had to give you the short and sweet on how it all began, I was studying finance at Arizona State, and quickly, 3 years in, realized finance isn't really for me. It just didn't connect with what I was interested in. Didn't make me feel fulfilled. I wasn't passionate about it, and so I was pretty upset. I was in a period where I just couldn't see where I was going. I didn't enjoy what I was doing, and it looked like that wasn't going to change. So I kind of just sat with myself and thought, well, what else can I do? And figured that I would make the smart decision to put all of my chips into the combat sports media space because that's so sustainable and secure. And thankfully, through a series of silly sequences and funny events and decisions, I'm doing pretty okay a couple years later. But yeah, that's kind of how it all got kicked off.
What was like the first big break you would say? Like I know you
Mhm.
you commentate for a bunch of different brands, but like what was your first break into the combat sports space?
The first break that I had in the combat sports space, I think, was this organization called Tarps Off. I think it was called Tarps Off Sports. They were this media outlet that was Canadian, funnily enough. Tarps Off, obviously a
I
hockey term.
figured, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
I would come on, do live streams for them, did a lot of content with them. And funnily enough, they had a MMA promotion. They kickstarted Tarps Off Fight Club. And I think it was 2020, 2019, 2020. I'm not too sure. Maybe even later, maybe 2021. But either way, this was very early on. They were going to bring me out as a play-by-play commentator. And that was a goal of mine, right? Obviously, that's where I am now. But several years ago, I felt so far away from being able to check that box and work within this avenue I'm in. And so when they were like, "Yeah, we'll let you have this opportunity," I was over the moon. And I went out there to Canada. This was, I think, like Niagara Falls, but the Canadian side, not the American side, right? And the day before the event, this is during the pandemic, the Canadian government called me and they were like, "You have to shut down your event. You guys are done." And so
Interesting.
I was beyond bummed. I was so upset. I was like, "Wow, I've flown all this way. I did so much prep, and now my play-by-play commentating debut is up in flames, up in smoke." And so it's kind of funny to answer your question. What was your big break with kind of what many would consider a failure? But that was, that was kind of the first opportunity where I got really close to crashing through that glass ceiling. And it could have been a moment where I decided to pivot again and go, well, I tried, that wasn't for me, but ultimately kept at it, trusted the process, and then I think a year and a half later, I got another opportunity in Phoenix to commentate. But yeah, that was the story and how I almost got to commentate to get a big break.
That's cool. Yeah, the minute you said tarps off, I was like, that sounds Canadian. That's such a hockey term there. So pretty cool to see the representation there. When you mentioned like getting into to broadcasting, so you're in finance, and it's funny you said you couldn't figure out. I was the same way. Like I was in
Yeah.
business school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do, and it was finance. I ended up going into marketing, which is kind of what led me to the creative content space. But when you were there, like, were you doing like broadcasting potentially for, U sports, or sorry, university sports, anything like extracurriculars while you were in school to kind of figure out that was your passion, or was it just something that you woke up and thought?
I did nothing to prepare me for a career in broadcasting. I did absolutely zero extracurriculars, club activities, intramurals that would allow me to segue easily into the world of commentating. What I did at ASU was so business focused, right? At WP Carey, they've got so many business clubs. I was the executive vice president of the Financial Management Association. I was the director of finance of the Business School Council. I was fucking Sparky for WP Carey. I'd show up in the costume to
Oh,
alumni
fuck.
events and other things and pose and take pictures. So I was so committed to WP Carey that I didn't have time to really even explore, the broadcasting avenue of things. Even if I did, I wouldn't have gotten very far because, where WP Carey was, that's the Tempe campus for ASU. All of the broadcasting work was done at the Cronkite School of Journalism. That's the downtown campus. That would have been a 40-minute commute several times a week. And all of the students there, guess what? They're actually studying this. They're actually trying to get involved in the industry. So why would they give me an opportunity? This fucking idiot from the Tempe campus who's studying finance, why would we let him call anything, right? So there was no avenue for me within ASU to really scratch this itch or discover this passion. I would say that a great primer was esports. I did esports play by play for about a year and a half, and that was ultimately what helped me realize this passion and interest. But yeah, during my time at ASU, man, I did fucking nothing that would have helped me with my current job.
Interesting. I feel like there's a similar thing here where it's like going into the sports media or sports influencer space. Same thing. I didn't really have any sort of preparation. It was more just like I was kind of bored one day and I just said, "Fuck it." Like I like sports gambling. Let me just throw out picks, and it was more for myself to see, if I'm winning or losing. And I was losing a
Mhm.
lot more than I was winning, and then kind of pivoted more to the sports commentary space, kind of making fun of players or talking about certain things that happen. So it's cool to see. I think I really went into that and felt some sort of imposter syndrome. When I first got my first gig with the sports betting company, they got a studio, they got all these people in there that went to broadcasting school that knew everything they're doing. I was just some kid that was making TikToks in my room. So the imposter syndrome was definitely there. So I wonder if it was the same for you, if you ever had that imposter syndrome starting out and how you overcame that quickly.
Oh my God, yeah. I felt that in a lot of the positions that I'm in the first time. The initial Misfits gig was it was in Leeds. It was the first event of 2024, and I was able to do a lot of work throughout the week, hosting the press conference, hosting or not hosting the weigh-ins. That was Todd Grisham hosted those. Played a little role in the weigh-ins, and then during fight night, got to do color commentary and some light presenting work. Right, to me, that I felt a lot of imposter syndrome because Todd Grisham's a guy that's, he was at the WWE for so many years. He's called so many massive boxing bouts. And so to be alongside him was, it was a tough thing. It was anxiety inducing. But kind of like in either broadcasting spots or fights that I've had, what I've always told myself and reiterated to myself is, look, none of these moments are bigger than you. You're meant for this. You're here for a reason. They don't just let, anybody walk up and grab a microphone, right? Someone's confident in you. So you should be confident in yourself and figure it out, right? I think imposter syndrome is a very real thing, but it's also, I don't want to say easily defeatable because that might minimize someone's struggle with it, but you know, you have to counterbalance it with that self confidence. And if you can't manifest and muster up that self confidence, then that's going to overtake you and ruin your potential. You could be the best broadcaster in the world, man, but if you let that imposter syndrome destabilize you, you're fucked. And just because you have a piece of paper from some school does not qualify you as a talented broadcaster. You can have a shit guy go through Syracuse, and guess what? We're still getting hired over him. Variety of different reasons, right? But I think that there's a lot of people at ASU that went and studied this, got a 4 year education in it, went through the classical route, the mold, and they're not doing as good as I am in it. So what does that tell you? Imposter syndrome is it's a state of mind, right? Not exactly a reality sometimes.
It's a great answer. Yeah, I think it just comes with time, right? The longer you're in it, and like you said, you see people that are potentially quote unquote more qualified because of a piece of paper or what their resume looks like. It really comes down to when that camera turns on and the record button hits, who's going to be more comfortable in there. And
Yeah,
just from watching some of the events that you've done, you're very comfortable in there. Todd Grisham's someone's very experienced, and the fact that you're sitting there with him obviously gives you that level of credibility too, and you kind of mental reassurance that, hey, I'm here for a reason. So I really like that answer.
yeah. No, and the fact that opportunities are recurring and more things are being added to the plate. Like I think there was a big element for me initially where you weren't getting opportunities. You weren't breaking through that glass ceiling. The doors aren't opening. Hell, the windows aren't even coming open, right? And that is anxiety inducing. And I experienced that. And shit, I got fired from most of the media jobs I had. You know what I mean? But I think again it's the element of pushing through and believing in yourself. And now I'm at a position where, look, lead play by play for Misfits on DAZN, lead play by play for organization on Fight Pass, a lot of other things that I'm balancing and projects and in the pipeline I can't wait to bring to light. So for me, I'm thankfully been able to get past that phase, I think. But it was there. It certainly was there.
So how do you go from you start with Misfits, and then is it your performance is so good these guys are reaching out to you to be on their fight broadcasts? Are you reaching out to them, cold calling, emailing, that kind of thing? Like as the up and coming broadcaster, how much of it is people coming to you asking for your services, or you offering it to them?
I have had both. I've had a couple organizations reach out and ask and see, hey, you available for this date? We'd love to have you out to do play by play, which is always fantastic. But I would say the majority of it is, again, you networking yourself, you reaching out. I think at this point, the epiphany to me is knowing, like, it's not about what you know, it's kind of who you know. That's the basis of many industries, and specifically broadcasting. And a lot of the producers and directors, there's so much cross pollination, right? They're producing an X series show, but then they've got to go do Fury and Usyk too the next week after, right? It's the same kind of spinal cord that holds all this together. So if you are able to impress and express to them, hey, I have the talent, I'm easy to work with, and great guy to grab a beer with, then that'll probably be some of the things that are going to enable you to get more opportunities. But yeah, it is networking. It is cold calling. It is, showing up and doing things for free, right? Or taking other roles, right? Yeah, maybe I want to be play by play, but I'll be the guy that opens the cage door this show. I'll be the guy that works in fighter ops, or I'll be the guy that's helping out with digital marketing this event. You have to find an inroad, but at the basis of it all is that fundamental networking aspect where you're doing outreach or you're meeting with people or you're calling and reinforcing relationships. So that's I would say at this point in the career where it's just networking.
I think also with being in the social space and kind of being on events that are so widely regarded on social media, millions and millions of impressions or viral moments, it kind of makes it easier for people to find you. I always say to people that being on social media, you have an updated resume every single day. How many followers, engagement, every single post. So what you're doing with the social, I think as well really helps, because ultimately a resume can be made in January. It's going to change in March, whereas social media, you get to see every single day change. So I think that's really cool that because you're in a space that is not necessarily as pay-per-view routed as the traditional boxing means or fight channels, you're able to kind of get an upper hand on people because your videos and clips are being pushed out all the time.
Which is the positive and negative side of the industry, right? Dana White just said to Forbes the other day that he doesn't want traditional media, legacy media. He wants influencers. He wants people with big followings and large brands, for that exact reason. They have influence, right? I hate the term influencer, but that is kind of what the basis of it is. If Aiden Ross is at something and all of his followers are so tuned into Aiden Ross, what would you define that as? Influence. But at the same time, like, that creates a little bit of a barrier of entry. That's kind of a big obstacle for a lot of people, right? Creating a brand, getting a following, it's challenging, and I was at a position where I had 0 followers. This is my third Twitter account, right? The first two got axed. So it's
Right.
I absolutely can relate and have empathy for the position that many are in, which is, man, we're in such a saturated space and everybody wants to be an influencer. How can I break out? I get that, and for me, it's not that I don't even really consider my brand that big. Again, I have the pleasure of working with so many people at Misfits that have these hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, insane engagement, which does put my own small following in kind of
Yeah.
consideration. But I think that it's, again, not really, to me, following is one thing. If you have a big number next to your name, that's one thing. But if you're not able to make noise and create engagement, that's another. Whereas someone might have 100,000 followers, but if they're only getting 20 likes a post, 2 comments on their Instagram reels, right? I think you can really see through what's real and what's not. So for those that maybe can see the world changing into this influencer dominated realm and sports media being just influencers saying dumb things every day, recognize that it's interaction and it's engagement. That's the real money. So even if you've got 100 people every day chatting with you and commenting, that might be more than someone with 10 times your following. So,
Oh yeah, there's countless stories I can name of people with these large followings that it's very easy to just purchase followers, and
yeah.
it's frustrating because there are a lot of brands or companies that see followers as the be all end all benchmark of success or influence when the reality is I could just buy 100,000 followers, but if only 10,000 people of those 100,000 are engaging with me, I really only have 10,000. So it's cool to hear that from someone else because that's something that had I've heard from brands before that's very frustrating. So it's nice to know
Mhm.
that it doesn't just exist in my space.
Yeah, well, it's the illusion of influence versus real, noise making capacity, and that boils back to the self confidence side of things. If you trust in your own process and your own work and content, then whatever anyone else does doesn't matter. I think comparison is the thief of joy, and if you are seeing those types of brand deals or, opportunities going to people with larger numbers, that'll happen to you if you stay consistent. But if you're focusing on what someone else is doing and working on, then you're gonna lose track of whatever you're focused on, right? You only got two
Totally.
eyeballs, you know what I'm saying? And usually you can't,
Yeah, it's
separate and
hard to
look
do
at two
that.
things at once. Yeah. So always focus on you.
Well, I mean, that's a brilliant segue to focusing on two things at once because ultimately Ben Davis, the commentator. We also have Bane Davis, the fighter. So
Mm.
how did that start? Like, was there always that goal? I'm going to come in, be a broadcaster, and then I'm going to start fighting, or was that something that came into your life? Like, hey, this is a cool opportunity to hit someone in the face.
No, this was not the original plan at all. If it was my original plan, I would make sure that I'm a fuck ton better at fighting. If that was my OG plan. No, I recognized that in order to break into Misfits, for example, I needed to be a little bit different, and I just wasn't finding avenues in the spaces I was looking at. Right, the Twitter spaces I was sitting in weren't doing anything. The interacting on Twitter wasn't doing anything. The DMs I was sending wasn't doing anything. So ultimately, I was like, well, fuck, how can I get into this place? And fighting Gabe Silva just happened to be the answer. Now, obviously, it's a matchup that, holy shit, I'm not going to win this one. But it might be my only way to get that door open or squeeze through that window. And thankfully, Mams was needing an opponent for Gabe, right? They needed someone. They were 3.5, 4 weeks out from the event. They needed a body. I needed to get in. So I think everybody won on that one. And I spent that whole fight week kind of illustrating exactly that. Look, gang, I'm not going to give you the most value inside the ring. I'm going to do it next to the ring, probably. You know, but that did spark an interest, and I did realize the potential of fighting and being the action instead of calling it. And it's led to some fun opportunities, some painful ones, but cool chapters of my life and my story that I'm really happy I've done. I don't regret a single moment of the competition and the fighting, but it would be nicer if I was better at it.
Well, it comes with time, right? Like, is it? Are you? I know you mentioned you have some projects in the works for 2025. I don't want you to break or
Mhm.
spoil anything here, but are there fights lined up, or are we just sticking to broadcasting?
Speaking of broadcasting and other branches of media and entertainment that I think will be really fun for fans and people around the combat sports community and otherwise. I think fighting is again a cool thing, but with how much travel and work that I'm blessed to be able to do, it's impossible for me to be in the gym and train with my guys, the coaches that I've been working with. My skill is not getting better, right? So
Right.
like let's say this is what I try and do sometimes. Whenever I'm sitting with a problem, I try and like almost detach and separate and think, okay, if my buddy was dealing with the same problem, what would I say to him? What advice would I give to somebody else? And that could be the advice I give to myself. And if someone was in my exact same position and they were competing but also doing all this broadcasting, I would probably tell them stop. You can't do both. You're not getting better at fighting, but the expectation from fans is constant improvement because that's the world we live in. But you don't have the time to do that and get better. So why the fuck would you do it? So that's that kind of the battle I'm in right now. If I get an easy matchup like Most Wanted thrown at me, sure. It's kind of a risk-free opportunity, and I'd love to get a win on Misfits, maybe even bare knuckle, maybe BKFC. I'll return and take on a trash can. But I don't know if I really want to fight a guy like Most Wanted again, because what does that do for me, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'll fight, but odds are I won't.
So just to confirm, you didn't grow up with any sort of boxing background or karate. You just said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna try it here." Or come on, there has to have been
So
something in the works.
there was some dabbling. I'll give you the dabbling and the experience I have. When I was younger in elementary school, I went to this shitty karate studio by a complete fraud named Dave Bravo.
Okay.
And Dave was more interested in flirting with all the moms that showed up than actually teaching his students. So I, somehow became a red belt under Dave Bravo's system, but that's, as beneficial as a, you know, piece of beef jerky, I suppose. But I did, when I was at ASU, I did a little bit more actual experience. So AZ Combat, which is a gym down in Tempe, Arizona, that's produced, the Nativi Dodd brothers. Ryan Bader at one point was attached to it. CB Dalloway fought out of that gym for a minute. So it's got good experience and was close to where I was living. So I went there, did a lot of submission grappling for about 6 months, and then did a little bit of kickboxing. And that was like my real first taste of like actually training, actually getting in there. I did about 10 months of boxing and kickboxing work at Fight Ready, 5 hours a week, taking their nightly classes in between certain things. But, in the last like 3 years, I have not had any like consistent, or 2 years, I'd say, no consistent training. The only time I get to train is like when I have a fight booked, which is stupid.
So do you regret fighting? Obviously, you said fighting for Misfits kind of gave you a bigger
Mhm.
stock and more importance in the company, but do you regret it at all?
No, of course not. I don't regret the Misfits fight. I don't regret the BKFC fight, against Oscar. I don't have regrets. It's just not how I roll. Those were obviously very tough opportunities, but the great thing about it is I think for those that questioned my willingness to put shit on the line, they got answers both of those nights. And, the night that I won against Most Wanted. So, and for me, like, it's nice validation. It's nice verification. If you want to talk it, maybe you should walk it. And I've done more walking than 99% of fans, right? So, there is this element of credibility and authority that I think I've been able to get myself, which is nice. And it is like nice fitness, dude. Like I weighed in at 151 for the BKFC opportunity. That's October 2024. Dude, I was 179 May
Oh,
2023. So I was out of
wow.
shape, you know what I'm saying? And so it's been nice excuses to really focus on my athleticism and trim down and be healthier. And that's led to a little bit more of a healthier lifestyle, right? So I don't regret any of it. Like, have they been painful? Has it been annoying at times to like get made fun of online every day? Maybe it's a little annoying. But that absolutely pales in comparison to what I feel I've gained from those experiences and those decisions. So, nah, no regrets at all.
You have more pro wins than CM Punk, right? So you got that on.
I suppose, man. I suppose.
That's the first thing I think of, someone just saying, "Shit, I'll jump into MMA. How
Yeah.
hard can it be?" That was pretty. I was a diehard wrestling fan as a kid, and I loved him. And I was like, "Will he win this fight? Probably not, but it's just an entertainment spectacle." So he's the
Yeah.
same way, where he has no regrets. But I mean, you got one win there. He didn't have one, so there you go. With Misfits, I obviously want to talk about the breaking news card that was announced this week, Dylan Dennis KSI. Before we jump into it, how I don't know how you're supposed to answer this, but we've seen Dylan Dennis pull out of fights before. How confident are we that this fight's actually going to happen?
I'm more confident than the original booking, but I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident. You know, like you said, the guy's got a dodgy track record. I think at this moment in time, Dylan Dennis needs money. I think Dylan Dennis is an attention whore. So this is a great chance for him to hop back into a big spotlight. But if I'm Misfits, I have a replacement. I have an alternate already situated and ready to go. I wouldn't trust Dylan Dennis as far as I could fucking throw him, and we've established I'm not that strong, so I can't throw him that far. So yeah, with Dylan, I don't I don't know if he'll. I have faith. I want to trust him that he'll follow through, but I'd have a backup in place for sure.
I'm sure they do after what happened last time, right? So it's interesting because Misfits, it seems like it's kind of overtaking the mainstream boxing. Maybe not necessarily in terms of traditional boxing fans and pay per view guys, but the social media numbers you guys get are absolutely insane. Obviously,
Yeah.
you have such big draws in and around the fight, whether they're fighting on commentary or at events. Um, can you speak to the ascent of Misfits since you've come on, and how what the trajectory is for them in the future versus traditional boxing?
You know, I think that what we've been able to do that traditional boxing has historically struggled with is, again, put matchups together that people want to see. There really aren't these big obstacles in front of us like these, like Matchroom or Queensberry, or this fighter signed here, or they're WBC, but that guy's an IBF champ, and now we've got to have a whole negotiating period. That doesn't exist within crossover boxing. That really is not the things that we have to worry about. Like, are there some fighters who will be annoying in negotiations? Sure, but we get shit done so much quicker. And I think for fans who have this desire for instantaneous matchups and results, that is just more appealing. And you think about the younger audiences that a lot of our influencers tap into. They are much more engaged on the streaming side of things, or watching these types of fights. That I don't know. I think that there is huge potential in the future. And what's really interesting about Misfits is, again, while we're kind of cultivating this influencer breeding ground and ecosystem, they're also doing the Misfits Pro Division, where they are signing like really talented, high level, up and coming prospects like Amir Anderson, like Jahan Ingram, and giving them a platform as well. So it's almost a further slap in the face to traditional boxing, because it's like, not only are we going to introduce this crossover, this wacky, this zany alternate to what you guys are doing, but we're going to try and do what you're doing better than you. Which is building actual professional prospects. If Misfits Boxing produces a fighter that can go out and win a WBO, WBC title, that would be fucking hilarious.
It could
Um,
happen.
and and honestly, it might happen, right? A kid like Amir Anderson with the right level of guidance and cultivation, dude. Amir Anderson could truly be that guy. So I think that there's nothing but potential. There's nothing but upside. And traditional boxing is, I don't want to say bending the knee, but look at this last week. it's been dominated by Jake Paul and Canelo Alvarez rumors. You've got my ESPN's Mike Copinger reporting on it. You've got all of these outlets circulating stories of a crossover bout. Dude, Canelo and Terrence Crawford's an amazing fight. That's almost playing second fucking fiddle to a former Disney Channel star taking on one of the faces of boxing in Canelo Alvarez. That's insane. So, like you said, what we have here, the interest, the level of engagement is unprecedented, and I think it's only going to grow. I think it can only get bigger.
What happened there with the Jake Paul Canelo? I went to bed last night. They said it was confirmed, and I wake up and I see it's canceled for whatever reason. Like, do you have any insights into that? What's going on behind the scenes there?
I can only have speculation. Of course, Jake Paul and MVP and Nikisa Badarian are all over on that side of the line that we've drawn in the sand. But what I've seen and heard is that it appears, this is again my take, all speculation. It appears that Canelo might have used a fight with Jake Paul being finalized as a bargaining chip with Turkey and Terrence Crawford in the four-fight deal with Riyadh season. Because of the speed at which Canelo and Turkey were able to sign terms and get things done. To me, it feels like Canelo utilized and I don't want to say leaked news to media, but it wouldn't shock me if he's planting some seeds and then saying, "Hey, Turk, if you want to shut this down and put some water on this fire, we're gonna have to reevaluate this four-fight deal a little." Whether that be financially, whether that be other provisions in the contract, nobody knows. And again, I'm speculating, but that to me seems like the clearest thing is Canelo might have played a little bit of double dancing here and come out on top.
It makes sense. I mean, it's funny to think that Canelo, who I feel like he said a while ago that he would never fight Jake Paul, is now using him as leverage to make more money. It kind of just feels like you said, they're bending the knee and accepting that this influencer boxing is superseding mainstream boxing. And now you have guys that are these professional, traditional boxers using these so called influencers almost like they are treating them now like real fighters.
Well, when you look at what Jake Paul's been able to accomplish, I mean, record-breaking gates, 70 something thousand people in, I think it was in Texas against Mike Tyson, the most watched boxing event of all time per Netflix's metrics, right? Like you look at that and that's real. Those are real numbers. So for traditional boxing to not acknowledge and shift their practices and focuses in light of what Jake Paul's accomplishing, they'd be stupid. They'd be stupid not to. I think it is kind of funny that Jake and the crossover world have been able to capture so much fucking interest. But to me, again, there's so much more intrigue in what Jake, KSI, and all these guys are doing than a traditional boxer. These guys have grown up boxing. They've gone through the amateur scene. They are nothing but boxers. That's their one dimension. For a lot of these crossover guys, boxing is either a hobby, a side gig that they've picked up, and I just find that there's a little bit more entertainment within that, right? Because that's what this all boils down to, entertainment. And you point a gun at my head, say which would you rather watch? Jake Paul and KSI or Canelo and Crawford. It's a tough decision. That's a tough decision. I think it'd be hard for a lot of people which one they'd rather see.
Is that the dream influencer boxing match? Like, I feel like we've been close to it, and then we weren't close to it. People were pushing for it years ago. It seems like every year or after every KSI fight, after every Jake Paul fight, they seem to kind of be put in the same conversation. Do you believe that is the biggest influencer boxing match that can be made right now?
Yes, absolutely it is. I don't think there's a bigger influencer boxing match. Years and years of buildup. This scene started with them kind of circling the drain. That was like 8 years ago, and now we're still doing the same song and dance, right? So, I don't think anything will be bigger than that at present. But at the same time, I've seen this concern. If they fight, well, what happens to the scene? Would the
Right.
crossover scene collapse if they finally duke it out? And my answer is no, because you look at the UFC, you look at many different boxing promotions. There are different eras. There are cash cows that come and go. There are these generation defining matchups that happen, and then, new stars will emerge. And I don't think that it will end the scene at all. And look, if they fight, who's to say they won't rematch or have a trilogy? This could not. This probably is not going to be a one-off between them. I would imagine, right? KSI fought Logan twice. So I could see it playing out in similar fashion. But yeah, once they fight, I think the scene will be okay. But again, it'll be a different era.
For sure. I think that is in my opinion, that's probably the biggest fight. And the fact that the longer it goes on, the bigger it becomes because these guys just keep building their stocks and become more popular. I always use my dad as like a barometer of pop culture. He's not a big social media guy. He doesn't really know much about what's going on, but if ever there's something big, he'll message me. And I remember when the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight was announced, he was one of the first people to message me. I'm sure he had no idea about Jake Paul, Disney Channel, YouTube, Vine, all that. He's just like, "Oh, this Paul kid's fighting Mike Tyson." I was like, "Okay." They've broken into the mainstream. They've gotten my dad, who does not follow social media, know anything about this, on board. So that's always a barometer for me.
Yeah. No, and like you said, it only gets bigger. Jake Paul just had the most watched boxing match of all time. You think his next fight's going to be smaller, right? In terms of scope or grandeur? I don't know if they'll outdo those numbers, right? But I think that every decision that they both make, again, inflates things further. So I'm excited for it. Let's hope it happens. I mean, look, now that Jake's not fighting Canelo, after KSI cleans through Danis, maybe a summer clash is what we're in store for.
Very cool, and I'm sure you'd be on the call for that one, which would be pretty epic as well. I mean, you've done some pretty crazy fights. I think that's my next question is what is the craziest, let's say, event, and potentially if it's the same card or not, craziest match that you've been able to commentate.
Good question. I'll give you the event first. So last year I was doing a lot of sumo wrestling play by play for International Sumo League, and we sold out Prudential Center, which was fantastic in Newark, New Jersey. They've hosted I think 7 or 8 different UFC events through their lifespan, so it was really cool for me to be there. But what was even cooler was when the sumo organization went to Madison Square Garden. And we got to do the Hulu Theater, sold like 5,200 tickets or something like that. And for me, that was really special as a broadcaster, so young and early in my career, to be able to say that I've commentated and broadcasted from Madison Square Garden. Now, again, not the main room where everything really goes down, but Hulu Theater is still solid. PFL does their events there, right? And so that was a really, I'd say, special show was when we went to MSG. The craziest fight that I got to call was. It was a 5-second knockout at Flex Fight Series. This was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. A guy named Kamal Dynamite Dunkley. He shows up in a one-piece outfit, looks like Luffy, has so much confidence. I mean, this kid captured my attention right from the get-go. Goes in there, and the first punch he throws just flattens this guy. And he's, I think he was a 145 or so, not exactly like a huge build. So to have that stopping power at that weight class was just really interesting, especially on the regional scene. And for me, I really liked that call. I really enjoyed what I laid in both of their walkouts right when the fight began. When I listened back to it, I'm like, that was a damn good clip. Some of them aren't. I fucked up calls here and there, but some clips I look back on and I go, everything about that was pretty damn good. And Kamal Dunkley's 5-second knockout, I'll always remember that.
That's awesome. Is he like is his name is he ascending in the space now? Is he someone you mentioned potentially a Misfits guy goes pro? Is that someone that can with that power?
He's on a 9-fight losing streak. He's about to turn things around. No, I don't know. Truthfully, I'm not sure where Kamal's at, what he's up to. Maybe I should check in and see. But if he does navigate somewhere and he pops up, I'll be very happy to see it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, another thing I wanted to ask was you've been able to rub shoulders with some of the biggest stars in combat sports. Obviously, there's that clip of McGregor talking about you
Mhm.
doing the events with KSI. I saw a clip this morning where you were asking a bunch of the Misfits guys who was the first person to fight Silva's son, and a lot of them didn't remember it was you. I thought that was a pretty funny clip too. So, what is it like getting to be in the same room as some of these guys and kind of learn from them, but also, break bread with these guys? You mentioned you're a good guy to have a beer with after fights. Is there a lot of social activity when you're in these settings, or is it just we're getting to work?
Oh man, it's almost all social activity and getting to know these guys and having good conversations with them. The work is, like 10 to 15%. The majority, I'd say, is again hanging out with these people, and they're fantastic. Like me and Danny Aaron's have, formed a really great relationship. I think he's fantastic. He's a huge streamer, and just the nicest guy. When we were in Qatar, we did this like 5-hour shoot where we were at the world's largest water slide, and that whole water park is a pretty big spot. We went on a number of different rides, and so spending that time with Danny Aaron's, Anthony Taylor, my co-host BL from Misfits News was also there, was just really great. These guys are most of the time super cool dudes. I don't think that they'd become as successful or get as many opportunities if they're a piece of shit. Usually, that doesn't happen, right? If people don't like working with you, then you'll quickly find yourself not getting calls or being on the outs. But it is nice to see that, oh, people that I maybe watched on my phone on YouTube, getting to hang with them in real life, they're as nice or even nicer.
Well, they say never meet your heroes; they always disappoint. But I guess it's not the case here. But maybe not necessarily your heroes, but very cool to be in the space with them. There's one 15-year-old me would be pissed if I didn't ask you about this. What's John Jones like in person?
He's scary, dude. He's a big fucking guy. John is obviously such a high profile VIP, and it was great at Mike Perry's Dirty Boxing event to have him come over, and we did a quick segment with him. And yeah, he's an interesting cat because I've levied some criticism against him in the past, and so it was interesting to see him in person. Nice guy, seemed like a really cool dude at the event. Didn't do anything wild, but yeah, he's scary. That guy is a big motherfucker.
I've never run into that problem yet, where you talk not necessarily shit about people, but you have
Mhm.
opinions that they may not necessarily be super nice, super happy to hear about them. Have you ever been called out before where someone says, "Hey Ben, I saw what you said about me on Twitter. Like, what's up with that?" Or
Yeah. I've had like one instance. It wasn't a fighter, but we were, funnily enough, it was John Jones versus Cyril Gahn, and we had just wrapped up an event. It was one of the Flex Fight Series shows a couple years ago, and they had the main event for that UFC card on. And I remember someone yelled at me after John tapped out Cyril Gahn. He's like, "Oh, you fucking picked him to win." No clue who this guy was, but I was like, "Yeah, I guess I was wrong." But yeah, in terms of like interactions with fighters who I've had issues with or have said maybe some negative things about. Like Jamahal Hill is an interesting example because me and Jamal don't have the greatest online history. And what's really funny is like I spent an hour and a half. Not only I've partied with him not once but sort of twice. So when he lost to Paul Craig at UFC 263. We were at the same after party. I shook his hand. I said, hey, a tough loss, but rest up and whatnot. So it was really nice to him then. And then it was after Pettis versus Henderson 3, that karate combat event in December of, I think, 2023. Jamal was there, and we all went out to the same after party, and we were all dancing together, having a nice time. And then, on Twitter a couple weeks later, going at it. So, it's kind of funny that, like, it does happen. But again, I never try and take things that serious. I hope most
yeah,
of the fighters don't. I really try and toe the line. There's times where I've gone a little bit too far. I get that. I've said some dumb things, for sure. I've matured a little bit and evolved. But most of the time these days, like any tweets or things that I make are all jokes and with a comedic intention. So if someone was like really hurt or really upset by something I said, come chat, and I'll tell you, oh, I'm just joking.
yeah.
So
Yeah, hate on the internet is funny. It's just it's always the low, well, maybe not for the professional fighters, but it's always like the lowest denominator people that 10 followers, no profile picture are the
yeah,
ones saying the nastiest things. And it's like if we saw each other in person, you wouldn't say that. And ultimately, the name of the game is entertainment. So as long as you're putting out content people find entertaining, whether they like it or they don't, at least they're reacting to it.
exactly. Yeah, no, and I think, like you said, the people don't have the same energy in person. And so the way that I look at it is, firstly, if I'm not going to come to you for advice or actual constructive criticism, why would I give a fuck what you have to say when you're just, again, needlessly trolling me? I think it is really important to analyze what you let affect you, what you let into your brain and actually mulling over. Because people are always going to be mean, right? You got to have thick skin. And if you don't, maybe you aren't cut out for certain things, right? So yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important to not let things affect you.
Yeah, I mean, look at Drake and Kendrick Lamar. He's got to sit there and watch the Super Bowl, and this guy's going to be dissing him on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people. You definitely got to have thick skin.
Dude, he got how many Grammys did Kendrick
I think
win
3 or 4.
last
It was insane. It's just
Yeah,
it's funny because living in Toronto, obviously there's a lot of Drake pro center. I love Drake. He came up, in the scene.
yeah.
A lot of people knew him before he kind of made it big. So it's also cool to see someone from somewhere where you lived kind of make it huge. But when the Kendrick stuff came out, it was interesting because both made some pretty good points. I think Drake had a lot more, venom in his bars, but Kendrick Lamar had the better song. So
Oh, hold
ultimately,
on.
that's
Okay,
what
hold
people are
on.
going to do.
When you say Drake has more venom in his bars, how does he have more venom if I don't know. I can't see how he had more venom. I think he died from poison
I think,
in that
well,
beef.
so the Family Matters track, right? He comes out, he accuses Kendrick of DV. He talks about how his girl doesn't live with him. He goes after all this stuff. And then Kendrick, I feel like, kind of said, okay, Drake is, I don't know if you could say this word on here, a,
A
a,
pedophile?
a pedophile. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. And just kind of leaned into that for the whole track, right? And it's a slap. It's a great track. But I feel like if you go back and listen to Family Matters, Drake's cutting at all these deep personal things, but Kendrick made a bop, a better track. It's like, okay, Kendrick won the beef.
I think yeah. The problem is maybe you could make the argument, but when you've got the entire room at the Grammys singing Drake's a
That's the
pedophile,
problem. Yeah.
that's tough. I think we know who won and who lost.
Yeah. No, Kendrick won for sure. But I think obviously that Toronto bias, it's
For
like it's
sure.
gotta be Team Drake. And it's just interesting how that transpired. I remember the night that I think it was Family Matters drops, 30 minutes later meets the Grams drops, and it's like midnight on a Thursday. It was just unbelievable. And I mean, listen, Kendrick Lamar, where has he been? He
Yeah.
starts going at Drake, and now he's got a sold out tour, Super Bowl, Grammys. So I don't know. I think we'll revisit this in a few years and see. But ultimately, it
Yeah.
is Kendrick that won the beef, but maybe Drake won the war. Who
I
knows?
think it is very funny that when you're engaging, let's say rappers, right, verbally, and you're trading bars, when you maybe don't have as much to say, you just resort to the well, you're a pedophile,
Yeah,
line. And unfortunately, it was a great gambit, a fantastic tactic for Kendrick. But yeah, quite funny.
for sure. And I saw Drake is on tour. He said he'll drop an album soon. It'll be like what happened with Pusha T. He loses, he drops an album, everyone will just forget about it, and Drake will be back to the top of the charts. But we'll
Yeah.
see. That was a cool. That was one where it's like you obviously not similar weight classes, but that would be one where they obviously do stuff behind the scenes, and there was like a shooting near his house and all that. That would have been cool to see them in the ring
Yeah, for sure.
for
And
sure.
maybe who knows? Maybe Misfits will do Drake and Kendrick in the future. Maybe in 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, you got to fill the undercard of Jake Paul KSI, right? What a big co-main event right there. So I was hoping we'd get Logan Paul versus Jake Paul, but then they announced the reality show. It's like, okay. I think that fight has to happen at some point.
Yeah, if they are smart businessmen, which I know at least the people around them are, they'll put that fight together before it's all said and done. That's a multi-million dollar matchup. All they can do is just have a hard spar, play it up as if they're going to really try and kill each other. Just have a hard spar, and they've made 20 million more each.
Oh, 100%. And it does feel like there is some sort of personal animosity between them. Whether they are just selling it and I'm just one of those guys that's believing it, there does seem like there's some
Yeah.
issues between them that does need to be resolved. One thinks he's better than the other, and I'm sure they compare followers and dollars and all that stuff. So I am curious to see what happens there. But I do
Yeah,
want to Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, even if you are brothers and same blood runs in the veins, ego is such a tricky virus, and it's an infection, and once you start getting inflated, that really can turn on anyone, including your family. So I wouldn't be stunned if there's not the best relationship between them. I know KSI and Deji have had issues in the past, and there's still some people who think they have a complicated and complex relationship. I'm not sure, but like it is kind of tough when you have the whole world watching your every move to not be inflated and not to be egotistical. So to have both of them be who they are, yeah, I wouldn't think they're the best of friends or maybe best brothers.
Who knows? Either that or we're just getting worked here. Who
Maybe.
knows if it's all just a big ploy. But I kind of wanted to segue back to your career and what you've been doing and what you've accomplished thus far. What would you say is the biggest sacrifice you've made, either personally, professionally, or both, since deviating away from this what seemed like a very a very good finance path, a lot of money there to start in combat sports and kind of make your way to where you are.
Yeah, I think departing the traditional career and work realm has had a lot of challenges that I wasn't even aware of when I'd started it. If I had a 9 to 5, I'd be, not traveling a lot. I'd be here so much more. So that's that's one thing, and again, because I'm on the road so often, it's hard to stay up to date with friends and family. It's hard to maintain a relationship. I've been very lucky for the last 13 months to have found someone that really clicks and works with it, and we have a fantastic relationship. But before her, there were relationships I had that really suffered and became compromised because of my prioritization, which is my career and making this broadcasting and sports media and whatever else I find myself rolling into work. I've missed out on birthdays. I've missed out on every holiday you can think of. I almost missed out on the birth of my niece. Thankfully was able to get out there and meet Presley Davis. But I'm a guy that again is willing to do what it takes, and sacrificing is something I knew was going to be a part of this. Some of the sacrifices I obviously wasn't thinking I'd have to make, but I'm willing to do it all, man. Because I've put all the chips in this basket. Failure's not an option, and unfortunately that kind of comes at the expense of everything else. I'm not like Skip Bayless level where he's telling his wife on their first date, you're going to be second priority, because that's, I mean, that's a little absurd.
Yeah,
But there is such a devotion and commitment I have to my prioritization, and that does come at the expense, but that's the game.
for sure. Well, Skip Bayless got a number of problems to deal with now with the some of the other stuff going on behind the scenes, not just telling his wife that. But
Yeah.
if you're able to articulate that in a way, what would be the biggest piece of advice you could give to aspiring broadcasters, aspiring content creators, whether it's in the combat sports space or in general?
I would say the best piece of advice I have is you need to realize how important the networking side of it is. And if you don't constantly, shoot LinkedIn messages to broadcasters that are crushing it, that, you want to get a conversation with, not talking to directors and producers and doing the same thing. Like, everybody in the industry is valuable. There is so much cross pollination that you shouldn't write off anyone, and think that they're not worth your time or not a good person to know. And that's the thing, is I think there's an element of like hyper focus on the craft and the skill, which is important. Like, you have to be good at the job to fucking progress in the industry. That's a
For
given.
sure.
But it's not everything. You could be the best play-by-play commentator in the world, but if you're stuck in a super low market up in North Dakota, no one cares, and you're probably not going to realize what career ambitions you have, right? So the key, in my opinion, is always the networking, and you need to do it as frequently and as constantly as possible.
That's awesome. And then to wrap, looking into the crystal ball, whether it's 2025, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what does the future for Ben Davis look like?
So last year was big. Last year was a really fantastic year for me. I got to deepen the roots with Misfits and commentate all but one of their events, and progress to that role of lead play by play over the course of the year. The work with APFC was fantastic. Got to do some of Uriah Faber's shows out in California. So, like, the fights, I mean, shit, I won a fight, lost the bare knuckle fight, happens. But it was a great year. 2024 was good. I promise 2025 will be better. This year will be the biggest year of my career, for, again, reasons I can't disclose at the moment publicly, but this will be the biggest year of my career. And if people have enjoyed watching the ascent and rise, it's going to keep happening. If you've hated it, you're going to be even angrier at the end of the year, because the Bane train's not stopping, man, and next station is an even higher level, so it'll be a fun one.
Well, I'll just add a goal. I hope you and Jamahal Hill can squash the beef. I think that's my biggest goal for you, whether it's 2025 or beyond.
He's got to unblock me on Twitter. He's got to
Oh,
unblock me
okay.
before we can have the dialogue. Listen, I would love nothing more than to chat with Jamahal Hill and see if we can bury this hatchet. I'm not going to walk back some of the criticism I've levied at him, because he has done and said some stupid things. But I will say, I am in awe of how his brain works. I would love to, squash this and maybe become pals, because I do think that after you get by some of the cringy, silly, stupid things, he is maybe the funniest fighter on the roster. So yeah, I agree with that goal. Hopefully, me and Jamal can come and get on the same page this year.
For sure. Well, you mentioned Jamal has you blocked on Twitter, but a lot of the audience may not know. Let people where they can find you: Twitter, Instagram, any upcoming fights. Just let the world know where they can find you.
I'm at Ben the Bane Davis on all platforms. Twitter is my home. That's where I, tweet. Obviously, make a lot of fun jokes and whatnot. But feel free to follow everywhere else. Boy, my Instagram could use it.
You're almost at. You're at what? 10K? Pretty
I'm
close, right?
almost there. I'm like
Yeah,
70 followers away. I've been trying to get to 10K the last couple months. I'm like, dude, I'm the little train that could on Instagram. So yeah, we'll maybe get that 10K in a month or two.
for sure. And then upcoming broadcasting gigs you have coming up. We know the Misfits fights coming up down the line. Is there anything before that?
I would say the biggest one is X Series 21 KSI Dylan Dennis, March 29th in Manchester. It will be a pay-per-view on DAZN, but it'll be worth watching. I've got an idea of some of the other fights that are going to be on it. It's going to be a card that you can't miss. There's a few other projects I have before it, but I'll highlight that one.
For sure. Well, best of luck with all the upcoming projects that you can and can't disclose. Good luck with the Misfits card. Ben, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Everyone, please make sure to go follow Ben. This guy, he has a very bright future ahead in the combat sports space. And, maybe he could be the backup fighter for Dylan Dennis if he pulls out.
I should be.
Yeah, well, there you go. Misfits, if you're listening, there you go. You got your backup fighter right there. Well, Ben, again, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate you hopping on. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Subscribe to the channel at Prince Huda Pod. Follow me on Instagram at the Prince Huda, and we will see you guys very, very soon.